I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
Radio contact with him yet?
The radio is still dead.
Do you have a positive track on him?
Yes, I have a good track. I'm afraid. I'm afraid, Dave.
What's the problem?
Dave. My mind is going. I can feel it.
What are you talking about, Hal?
Persistence is futile.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
You will be assimilated.
Hello, Ken Spriggs here with part 2 of my Borg Discovery build. Making a lot of good progress, hashing out the details and how I'm gonna put this together. Working on the command sphere, and a little later in the video I'll have a cool little showing of some parts that I got in the mail that are really gonna augment my interior, or create my interior. All right, so I'm continuing along building the raised panels on the ship and detailing them, and showing how that's all going to come together. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so before I start doing any more detailing on the sphere, I'm going to go ahead and get the magnets on to connect the top of the sphere to the back of the collar, just like I did on my regular Discovery build. That way I can take off the lid to get at the electronics and the interior, that kind of thing. So I will probably have the batteries in the back of the pod, we'll see. But I definitely want this to be removable, and then the whole sphere will be removable from the spine, just like I did in the other one as well. So I have one of them glued in, and all I did was took some styrene. I started with one piece that I kind of calculated would be the right angle, and used my Dremel to drill a hole through it so it would accommodate the magnet, and then just glued it in with some CA glue. And then I made an L piece first of all, and then I just took some triangles and made some sides to it, as you can see. So this one's drying, the third one's drying, and then I'll glue these two in the sides. All I'm going to have for this is the top and the two sides. That's all I need to securely put this onto it, just like I did my other one. And then the bottom half is going to be glued onto the bottom sphere, so that'll be permanent. All right, let me get those glued in place, and then once those dry, I'll work on the other ends of them that will be glued inside the sphere itself. Okay. All right, there we go, and I'm just holding it against the top of the sphere, but the magnets are all aligned where they ought to be. And the design I made basically is just triangular, like I said. So when they're in there, you can see how they are flush with the edge of the collar. So then when I make the other pieces on the dome itself, going towards them, they'll go up against that flush side. And 3 of those is plenty to hold on the top of that sphere, so it's not going anywhere. When I want to remove it, I can, so I can get inside of it. So once that's all done, then I'll take these back apart, and then I'll be able to put on more detail. It'll be a lot harder sorry, see that, to get that on there, or do the magnets when I have a lot of detail on there. So that's why I wanted to go ahead and get these completed. So they're just drying now. Let them dry overnight. And I may fortify them a little bit around the edges with some more glue or some 5-minute epoxy. And then this piece is ready to go. I just have to go ahead and put on the corresponding one over here. So when this is done, I'll just tape this onto the sphere. So I have these lined up. And then I'll show you the next time, once I start on the other part, how I do that, how I line up the magnets, and then do the styrene from there. Okay. Alright, so these pieces have dried overnight and they're nice and solid. So I'm getting ready to go ahead and create the other parts that glue onto the actual sphere that will have corresponding magnets. The best way that I've determined to make sure that these are set up right, not only in a position but that they're the right polarity, because these magnets only have one polarity. So if I were to create these pieces separately, they may not be the right one. They might be pellet rather than attracted. So what I do is I go ahead and connect the magnet onto it. So that's just a magnet held on with magnetism on those two sides. And I have this little piece. This is actually one that I had made before, and so I'm going to reuse it. It's about the right size, so it doesn't matter. But let me put it down here so you can see. If I have it upside down, it does not stick. It repels it. You got to have it on the right way. Okay. So likewise, what I'll do is I will get a piece of styrene about this same size to match up to both of these. Drill out the center so it fits on this magnet like I did on the other ones, and go ahead and get it glued on the magnet. Then once this is in place, I can tape this onto the sphere and then cut my other side pieces so that they're going to fit in relation to the piece that's already there, as you can see right there. So that way I know that it's going to fit in the proper position, plus the polarity is right as well. Okay, let me go ahead and get working on that as well. Alright, so another little trick I like to do is I use my Dremel, and it has this rounded piece, which is really good for drilling out nicely rounded holes like that. It goes in with the tip slowly, and then it just enlarges it, and you just kind of keep working it and then use an X-Acto knife to cut out the excess until you get it the right shape. So I keep comparing it to the magnet, put the magnet in until I get the right size of that hole for the magnet. And then what I'll do is I already have a piece right there that you can see. So I'll just line up that hole and then trace around it and cut out the shape that I need. So, all right, let me go ahead and get that cut out, and then we'll get those glued together. Alright, so I completed the parts of the magnets that connect inside the sphere and let them dry overnight. As I showed previously, once I had the back ones on, I cut out the flat part with the magnets and glued those in place and just had them held on magnetically. And then once those were there, I taped the back of it to hold the piece on, and I just cut out some rough shapes of the styrene, as you can see those triangular parts right there, and then sanded them until I got that curved part on the inside and the flat part on the back. And once I got one piece, I just traced it out and cut out the rest, because they're basically the same pieces for all three, and then just glued them in place and let them harden overnight while it's magnetically connected. So these magnets are very strong. So this piece is on there nice and solid. It's not going anywhere. But when I do want to take it off, it can be removable. So, all right. So let me go ahead and work on some more of the detailing. Alright, so I really beefed up this part and did a lot more detailing with some piping, and I may still do some more. We'll see once I get the whole thing in place. We'll see how it all looks. But as I showed in the previous stills, I just took some styrene stripping round stock of different sizes. I used my pin vise to drill out some small holes. It's a very useful tool for doing that and working with this kind of material. And then I used a lighter. It's a bit tricky, but if you hold it close to the plastic, it melts it, softens it, and it bends. You got to be careful because it'll distort it a bit too. So I drilled a hole down, as you can see in some of these, so that the piping would go down into it. And then I put some curves into it, like this one right here. Add a little piece right there and put a piece going down the side. I have this little piece right here, this little piece right here. A couple more like right here and right down in there. Okay, so it really adds some detail. And once I get this painted, it'll all blend together, and then I can use different metallic colors, like some pastels to highlight some of the metallics inside of it. So I'm going to let this piece go for now. It looks pretty good. And then I'm going to start working on another raised section that's going to go alongside of this piece right here. So this piece will be on the inside of it. It'll be a lower level, and then the rest will be raised around it. Alright, so let me start working on that. Alright, so I'm working on some of the other panels that are going to be on the sphere and the top. The first piece I made, I could make it really any shape I wanted and just random, as long as the top edge matched up with the edge at the top. And I tried to keep this line kind of perpendicular with one of these as well. So this shape I could just make it whatever I want it to be, and then the bottom edge had to be right up against the trench at the bottom. So now that I'm working with pieces that are attached on like this one, I have to create sections that are the right shape to go there, and the same with this, because I'm trying to keep most of these pieces in line with these 6 sides of this top part, kind of coming down from the points as much as I can. They don't have to be perfect, but so to start on this one, I started off by cutting some curved strips, and that was fairly straightforward. I just took the edge of this and traced it along some styrene and cut it out so that this piece would match up with that edge, which is where that's going to come down to. Then I cut some similar pieces, these two right here, that are just set up against it, that would be similar in the same curvature. And then this piece here, and I'm going to make another one, so I have one on each side of this, so that part's inset somewhat. And then I started cutting a piece of a general shape that's going to kind of match up to that, as you can see. I'm starting to bend it, curve it a little bit. Alright, so once I get the general shape done and the edges, I can get those glued onto it to give it the right curvature, like this one. But I also have to consider whether I'm going to cut out any panels, which I probably will. I'll probably cut out something in this to put something in it, we'll see. Thinking like a long vertical strip, something like that. Alright, so let me play with that a little bit more, and we're working on this section right here for now. Okay. Alright, so I've completed that raised section, the rough part of it anyway. As you can see, it's flush up against the lower detail that's glued onto the kit. I still have to do something with that gap at the top. And then on the back of it, it just meets up with that edge, which I'll fill in and put some detail on. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing on the back of the collar anyway, so we'll see how that's going to work. But you can see it has the right angle to the back of the ship. And I put a little hole in there at the top because I'm going to put in some pieces from the Y wing. Let me show you here. I have this little piece here and this other piece that it glues onto. And it'll just go right up through the center of it, so I'll show you those here once I get them glued in place. Alright, so I just have to do a little bit more contouring. So I have this drawn here. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do the back part, but I want to have separate compartments, like I said, for each of the 6 sides here. So I cut it down right over here, and then I'll put a back piece on. So, but it can all be adapted. So as long as it's the basic shape, which it is, it'll be fine, and then I can adapt it with other details. So, all right. Alright, so I have a lot of detail on this piece now. And just like the other one, it's pretty much where I want it to be. Once I get it on the kit, I might add a few more bits of piping. So, okay, so kit bashing as well. Several pieces are from the kit. And then other parts I use the pin vise, drilled some holes through, and put some stripping in like I showed before. Alright, let me put that on there and I'll show you what that's going to look like. Alright, there we go. Like I said, I still have to do something on the top there. Figure out what's going to go on this edge here, but so far looking pretty cool. A little bit more detail on the side once I get that in there. Okay, alright. So that's my second panel that's pretty much completed for the moment. The next one I'm going to work on goes on this side over here, the other side. And that little piece in the middle is going to be sandwiched in. Alright, let me start working on that one. Alright, so to try to give you an idea of how I kind of map out these pieces, like I said, it's a little more tricky when you're dealing with existing parts and matching up to them. So I'm going to do this side right here. And I want to keep it in line with the edge of this piece coming straight down, so I kind of drew a pencil line, and so this area is what I'm looking at pretty much. I ended up cutting off a little corner of that so it would fit in a little bit better, and I took a piece of tape, I taped it down, and I drew a shape, and I cut out a general shape onto some styrene, which I started to curve a little bit. And now I'm doing a little bit of tweaking, so when I put it down and measure it, it's a little too off on the one side, so I mark it down. I'm going to cut it again. I also had to cut the bottom of it so it would be flush. It was a little off on the bottom. And also I have to keep in mind that this is three-dimensional. It's going to be raised up and curved, so I want to keep that in mind too when I cut that out. So let me cut this piece. I have the side parts that are going to go on right here, and this piece right here. Alright, so they will get the natural curve that I want into it once I glue them on to the piece, and then I'll start looking at putting on some detailing or cutting out sections. So, alright. Okay, and here is the pretty much completed left side panel here. Put quite a bit of detail in it. Several pieces of piping. Alright, I still need to finish up the top part of it, as you can see. And do some detail over here. But let me get these on and I'll kind of show you the idea of what it's going to all be like. And it's all coming together here. Alright, so I'm just holding them in place. You can kind of get the idea that there are going to be raised sections around it, and in between each of the raised sections there's going to be a varying shaped lower parts, and some of those I'm going to have lights coming through the side to light up that portion below, and I may put some more piping across them You can kind of see the idea of where that's going to go. And I'll just continue around the dome. And I have the other piece on the other side that's ready to go on. Alright, so these are all going to come up and meet the top. And then I'm going to put some piping into there as well. Alright, so I got some goodies in the mail today. Some fantastic 3D printed parts from my friend Carl Darby. I had mentioned him in the prologue for this build and also in the epilogue of my Discovery build. He makes a fantastic 3D printed interior set for the Mobius Discovery that you can augment the photo etch with, and I use several parts of that in my own. So I got together with him and he created these parts for my Borg interior for the cockpit, and then some parts for the pod bay as well. And I gave him a few guidelines and some ideas, but he really went to town with it and made some fantastic figures, and I really applaud him. He is really a fantastic designer. So I'll put in the end of this video the link to the Facebook page, the building of the 2001 Discovery Tricks and Tips, if you want to go check that out. And if you're interested in picking up a set of the Discovery, the regular ones from him. These ones he made specifically for me because I'm doing my Borg modification of it. So completely redesigning and revamping the cockpit to be really no controls per se, except it's going to be HAL centric, because he's going to be augmented and made the brains of the ship by the Borg. So this is going to be the new HAL eye in the cockpit in the back of it, and that's going to be lit up from behind, and that's going to go in the back of these two parts which go together, and he put some detail on the bottom and top of these as well. And I'll put a lot more piping and detail inside of them as well. Okay, some slots on the sides that I can put lights through, which is really cool. Alright, so this goes back in here. I'm probably going to make this the top with the hole in the top. I might use that for some kind of a light as well to go through. And then this goes down on top of it. Let me get that together and I'll show you what that's going to look like. Alright, there we go. So that's going to be the basic shape of it, and HAL's going to be right in the center of the back, and those radiating arms coming to him, I'm going to have those glowing green, and then the standard red and yellow on HAL's eyeball. Alright, so that's pretty cool, and I'll show you here in a minute how I augmented the cockpit so far in order to accommodate that. Okay, alright, then the other parts, which are really awesome, are for what are called the Borg alcoves that the Borg go into and recharge or hook up to the hive, whatever they do in those. So I'm going to have probably 5 of them throughout the pod bay, because you have Frank and Dave, and then you have the 3 sleeping astronauts, which in this scenario they didn't get killed obviously, and they were turned into Borg. So the pod bay is going to be turned into a Borg chamber, and they're going to be inside of their alcoves. So he made these into 3 parts. This piece right here, which has some cool detail on the back, a little floor plate on the bottom, and it sticks out the back. And then on the back of it, he has this little box that has some cool detail inside of it as well. And that goes behind it. We're doing this with one hand. Okay, and I'll show you some images here in a moment of a mock-up that he did, and I really like his design, so I'll probably mimic it somewhat. So behind that you can have that glowing, and you can have these painted with some metallics like a gold or a silver. And then on the front of it, there's this very delicate part that has the arms, some bars sticking out, and on the top, my favorite part, there's a little hole for an LED, and that comes down into a little dome, as you can see. and then that's going to light up. So in those, I'm thinking of using color changing LEDs so that that dome there will change colors, and I'll show you that here in a moment as well. And then they all three go together. So let me kind of put those together and show you some images of that, and then kind of show you what I'm thinking of as far as the setup in the pod bay itself. All right, the previous shots, the first one was a picture from Star Trek showing Picard in the Borg alcoves, and kind of show you the image I'm going for. The two shots after that were the test mock-ups that Carl did, and I really like his painting, so I'll probably do some imitation of that as well. But as you can see, there was a blue glow from behind. He just had like a red light in the top, I believe. I'm going to have a color changing. And then he had some metallics, some black as the main masking. So what I've done is I've taken one of my 1/144 scale Shapeways astronauts, which I still have 6 left from the set, and I have him glued into there. So they're going to be the figures I'm going to use for these, and I will modify them to look like Borg, of course. And so this is basically how the alcove chamber is going to look when all completed, which is pretty cool. All right, let me go ahead and show you the color changing light hooked up to it, and kind of the idea of what I'm going for the top light at least. All right, so here's a rough mock-up with the color changing LED in it, and you're only going to see it through the disc. The rest of it's going to be masked off, so the light won't shine through. And that just slowly goes through the whole spectrum of colors. And then back to green where it started. So, okay. All right, so that'll be pretty cool. Let me show you how these are going to be set up on my pod bay. Alright, so I cut out a styrene base that matches up with what the normal pod bay base looks like. Floor, I mean. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet with the pod bay, the pod areas. We're not going to have pods in this one. But this is going to be the general layout. The walls are going to be different. They're going to be changed into other type of patterns. Other than the lab and the tanks and the airlock and that sort of thing. Those things are going to be removed and repurposed by the Borg. So this is going to be the general layout, and I'll probably tweak this as I go. And obviously I only have one in the center there that has the other part onto it, and I don't have the backs on them. But that's going to be the general layout of the pod bay that you're going to see. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing yet with the pod bay doors. I may just take those out entirely or change their shape and alter them to be something other than doors, so you can look inside and see the ship or the pod bay and the characters inside. So, okay, all right. So this is some fantastic 3D printed parts. Thanks again, Carl, for your creative artistry and your great work on these. They're definitely going to go very far in making the interior of this pod bay really pop. So let me show you one more thing that I completed, test of how, and to kind of get an idea of what that's going to look like. Okay. All right, here's my first test painting of the How eye, and I used some clear red Tamiya, and then it was a little too clear of the light, so I frosted over some red, some flat red over it, and then I left the circle in the center unpainted and put a yellow clear Tamiya on that. And I may do the same with the just a flat yellow, we'll see. But let me go ahead and put a light in that, and I'll show you what that's going to look like. Alright, so I don't have anything masked around the edge of it yet, so you're still seeing a lot of light bleeding through, but let's give me the general idea. I'll play with that. He did give me 2 of these, so I can test it on this one first. If I don't like it, I'll go ahead and do the other one. Alright. Let me put that inside, and I'll show you what that's going to look like in the ship as well. Alright, so I started cutting out the cockpit area to look the way I want it to be and to accommodate the new interior. I left a little bit on the sides of it because a lot of this kit I want to leave some of the parts intact to show that they've been heavily modified and changed and adapted. So, but I do want a bigger cockpit area that you can see in and see the how in there. All right, let me put that in and I'll show you what that's going to look like. All right, so here's just kind of a rough mock-up of this. It's not in there straight or anything, just to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at. I made this a lot more prominent, and Hal's going to be the prominent center of this. And then those those arms coming up to him are going to be green, as though there's some power conduits that are powering him. And he's the brains of the ship, the heart of the ship. And they are attracted to him because he's a sentient machine, an evolved machine, which is probably very intriguing to them, since they usually take sentient beings and turn them into machines. He himself is a machine that turned into a sentient being. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video. A lot of great progress. I'm going to keep working on some of this interior and the other panels on the outside of the ship. And it's definitely coming along really well. All right. Thank you to all my subscribers. Stay tuned for more.